After finishing a beautiful little poem, have you ever said things like, "Wow, this poem is just great. It made me feel this joy and peace that I haven't felt lately"? Have you ever finished a novel and said, "This novel is one of the best works of literature because it left me feeling grateful and gave me a new respect for life"? If you're doing any of this, you're trying to judge a work on the basis of the emotions it evokes. And then you're committing what new critics W.K. Wimsatt and Monroe C. Beardsley call the affective fallacy. But what exactly is this affective fallacy? Let's have a look. In the year 1949, two new critics, William K. Wimsatt and Monroe C. Beardsley, wrote an article named The Affective Fallacy in the journal called the Sewanee Review. The same essay, a little modified of course, was published in Wimsatt's book The Verbal Icon in 1954. In the essay itself, Wimsatt and Beardsley do not precisely define what affective fallacy is. Believe me, I searched for it, they did not do it. I read the whole essay, there was no definition. However, after reading the essay, we could deduce that they mean that affective fallacy is an error that a literary critic might commit if, instead of paying attention to the subtle workings of language, the metaphors, the associations, the slight suggestions, instead of paying attention to all of that, if the literary critic focuses on the psychological effects of the poem, of the work, then that critic is committing what they consider a fallacy called affective fallacy. In the essay, Wimsatt and Beardsley take the example of another new critic, Clent Brooks's analysis of a certain poem. Wimsatt and Beardsley quote Brooks saying that the last stanza evokes an intense emotional response from the reader. Here, we can see that Brooks pays attention to the emotional response from the reader, which is quite an antithesis to what Wimsatt and Beardsley want to say. Brooks is analyzing a poem on the basis of the emotional response it evokes in the reader. But Wimsatt and Beardsley in the very next sentence tell you that this statement is not really a part of Brooks's criticism of the poem, rather a witness of his fondness for it. If a literary critic judges a poem like that, it's a witness of their fondness for the poem, it's the praise for the poem, not literary criticism, at least not objective literary criticism. And then, Wimsatt and Beardsley take another line from Brooks's criticism of the poem, which says, "The conjunction of the qualities of sadness and freshness is reinforced by the fact that the same basic symbol, the light on the sails of a ship hull down, has been employed to suggest both qualities." Now you see what happened. In the first line, Brooks was just mentioning an emotion that the poem evoked in him, and hence we considered that line only as a witness of his fondness for the poem. But here, he is giving you the linguistic elements that evoked in him those emotions, and those linguistic elements become the object which evoked certain emotions in the readers. And an objective criticism is concerned about the objects, the linguistic elements that created those emotions, and not the emotions per se. So this was the first thing mentioned in the essay, and it was quite simple actually, that the next time you venture out to critique a poem and you want your criticism to be objective, which I hope you do, don't judge a poem on the basis of the emotions, the psychological impact of the poem that it has on you, but judge a poem on the basis of its literary value, which is created by the linguistic elements of the poem, the juxtaposition of various elements, the language of the poem, the devices used, the associations and the suggestions, and the various things that literary artists only are capable of doing. The second thing a poet should keep in mind while producing a piece of art, and a critic should keep in mind while evaluating a piece of literary art, is that the emotion should not be expressed in direct terms. One should not be saying in a line of poetry that he was very angry, it left him teary eyed, or she was really afraid and the child was really happy. These expressions do not create art, as you can see. The emotion in poetry should not be communicated to the reader. And these are Wimsatt and Beardsley's words, which I find really interesting. The emotions should not be communicated to the reader like an infection or disease, not inflicted mechanically like a bullet or knife wound, not administered like a poison, but presented in their objects and contemplated as a pattern of knowledge. Here, two things are highlighted. One, whenever an emotion is stated, it is better to accompany the emotion with the reason for the emotion. If by the end of Homer's The Iliad, Achilles was feeling the fire of revenge, what was the reason? If the readers know the reason, they'll be able to better connect with the work. So, in the second part of this statement, Wimsatt and Beardsley go one step further to tell you that perhaps one shouldn't say that Achilles was revengeful at all. Instead of that, they should contemplate the emotion as a pattern of knowledge. Here they are advocating T.S. Eliot's idea of an objective correlative, and they are trying to tell us that a good poet is the one who wouldn't say that Achilles was revengeful at all. He would find an objective correlative, he would find a vehicle, he would find some symbols, some imagery, some motifs to communicate that Achilles was revengeful. Achilles' revengefulness will not come out straight away, will not come out directly at the reader in a coarse manner, but in an artistic manner where it is expressed through a number of objective correlatives. Here, Wimsatt and Beardsley also give the example of Macbeth, and they tell us that the news of Duncan's murder comes to us after Shakespeare has created a number of objective correlatives. Let's see what examples Wimsatt and Beardsley give for this. They say that Duncan's murder is set in its galaxy of symbols: the hoarse raven, the thickening light, the crow making wing, the babe plucked from the breast, the dagger in the air, the ghost, the bloody hands. All of these objective correlatives have given Duncan's murder an ancient value, a fixed emotive value. Cultures will change, time will change, literary standards will change, but Duncan's murder will evoke the same emotions because it has been set in these objective correlatives. This is the way art should be created, and a good critic, an objective critic, should look out for art like this to assign literary value, not the kind of emotion it evokes, but how that emotion has been evoked. So basically, these were the 2 points that were highlighted in the essay. Number 1, an objective critic, a critic who's using the new criticism methodology of reading literature, should avoid taking the reader's response into account while critiquing a poem. Readers might be different, their responses might be different. If we start taking their responses into account, the field of literary criticism will be vague and uncertain and impressionistic and relative, which is opposite to the agenda of new criticism, which was systematizing the field of literary criticism. Second thing that they try to do in the essay is to give you a solution for this. A critic should not look for the emotions that were evoked, but he should look for how the emotions were evoked, how the emotive value was assigned to a certain images, words, motifs, events, and then the emotion has been expressed. For this, they use Eliot's objective correlative as a benchmark. So this was basically the recap of the lecture. I sincerely hope that these videos are helping you. If they are, kindly consider subscribing to my channel and giving this video a thumbs up. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great day.